Alrighty, guys. I believe everybody is here, and so I just wanted to get started and thank you to everybody for joining today's roundtable, cybersecurity strategy that matters: how to stay ahead of the threats. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. Everybody is muted and your video is off, but if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the chat feature, and I can try to get those questions answered for you during the presentation. Secondly, this roundtable is being recorded. It will be sent out to you guys later today, so be on the lookout for that. And lastly, if you have any follow-up questions after the roundtable has ended, feel free to email the solutions@diopath.com with any questions that you guys have, and we will get them directed to the right person. So I'm going to hand it on over to you, Matt. Go ahead.
Yeah, morning, everyone. Appreciate you spending time. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Briggs. I'm the Director of New Business Development and Channel Sales at Diopath. I've been with the company for 19 years. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for spending time. In this session, we are going to get inside the brain of one of the best CTOs in the business, Diopath CTO James Melcher. And today we're going to, as Jordan suggested, talk about cybersecurity. It's on the top of everyone's mind. So the format is going to be rapid fire Q&A. As always, like Jordan said, if you have any questions, please ping us in the chat feature, and then we'll try to address all your questions. If we can't, we'll certainly follow up to address them after the roundtable. So it's going to be reasonably short and sweet, kind of bite-sized information here, so 30 minutes or less. So as I mentioned, security is top of mind. James and I and team are involved in security-related discussions on a daily basis with clients, prospective clients, and partners, peers. That said, I thought what we do today is hit on topics and content we've been talking about recently. So James, I know you love being in the hot seat, so let's get rolling. So first things first, if you could sum up your thoughts on cybersecurity in one word, what would it be and why?
Risk. Risk. I mean, honestly, Matt, when I start thinking about cybersecurity, it's really, risk mitigation. Like what's to come? What are we doing? What are we doing about it? Really, and honestly, that's what it's turned into is really been more so, how are you combating the risks that are out there or that your company will be posed with, right? And I think the other word, is really cyber resiliency. All right, it's not just about what you're doing from from a tools perspective, but it's also planning and making sure that your environment is really resilient against cyber attacks, right? So those two words, cybersecurity and cyber resiliency, really go hand in hand, I would say.
Yeah, great. And I think from my perspective, I think it would be improvement. That's kind of the first thing that springs to mind. So if organizations aren't focused on finding solutions, people, and processes and partners to improve the security posture continuously and proactively,
Oh yeah.
then you ask for trouble. And threat actors are getting more sophisticated, right? More organized, more brazen. The technology that they're leveraging, can bypass, tools, instrumentation. So it's kind of a scary prospect, but you have to always be in this mindset of continuous improvement, right?
Yep. Very true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and then, I know I've heard you say this in the past. This is just more of a comment. Not only is security operations about risk management, but, that's where IT operations in general, right, is going. It's all about risk management. So care to comment on that?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the days of segmentation of the organizational structure are, I hate to say it's kind of like a thing of the past, right? You saw the DevOps, SecOps, and the combining of those, right? And really, at the end of the day, risk management it's a key component throughout the whole organization. If we're not paying attention to it, right, from an operations perspective, from a security perspective, from organizational structure, from a governance, how are we reporting on it, all of those type of things. Really, I mean, we are doing a disservice to, within the IT department or our IT organization, because if we're not paying attention to that, your cybersecurity auditors are, the bad actors are for sure, right? So if you're not
Yeah.
paying attention to risk and risk management and putting things in place for that, just makes it a little bit easier for them. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
Well,
I had a question come in if it's okay to ask.
yeah, jump in.
Alrighty. So the question says, more threat actors have been directed to the K-12 sector. What do you think is the best prevention as far as devices? Chromebook, OS, Windows? What are your thoughts?
James, go ahead, and then I have some.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go straight to the tech, right? And really my response will be, you look at breaches of large organizations and you look at the tech that they had in place, and let's just take names out of it, right? They had the best of breed of every tech that was out there. At the end of the day, it's going to be what have you put in place from a security program perspective? How are you governing that? Do you have the budget to govern that? And then putting the right tech in place, right? So Chrome, you name it, right? But if you don't have the right security program in place to manage those systems, to make sure that you're watching what is actually happening on your network, it really, sorry, it just really doesn't matter about the tech at that point. It's really the governance and really the structure of the security program and how well and thought out it was put together. And I hate to say, some organizations like we've seen on the EDU side or education spaces, that might be lacking. They might be falling a little behind where, in the commercial arena, there's regulations that are pushed down to them they're pretty stringent from a security perspective. So um, sorry not to answer it from a tech perspective, but really it's how good is the security program that's in place.
Yeah,
And
and
so.
I'll chime in here, because we preach, outside of trying to value the assets in which you're trying to protect, right? That's important to, again, understand ROI and how much you need to spend on a security program. That's important. To James's point, I think you need to align to a framework, and then, once you've aligned to a specific framework within EDU or outside of EDU, then you can start to make more of those tactical decisions around what tools, what instrumentation are going to be deployed, because everything needs to be in sync, right, and working in concert. And so what we find is most people in IT want to go straight to tools and instrumentation because that's how it's always worked in the past. But security is a program; it's not, a bunch of tools. But that being said, there are certainly tools that will secure the environment more so than others. You just don't want to make those decisions with blinders on. You want to understand how that aligns to a framework. And when I say framework, SOC 2, Type 2, maybe it's CMMC, maybe it's the NIST cybersecurity framework. In some cases, schools have aligned to Center for Internet Security, top 20, which is kind of a practical and pragmatic approach to what operational controls need to be in place. And so we're not dodging, the answer to the question, but I think, that's, our perspective on it. So thanks, Jordan. That was a good one. Good question.
I
Um,
actually had another question come in during that answer. The question says, it seems that every IT company is now offering cybersecurity services and solutions. How can an organization properly vet providers that are genuinely providing solid cyber solutions versus providers who are just jumping on the cyber bandwagon? Same question to the solution software in general. The market is flooded and it's very difficult to understand what's actually effective.
yeah, James, go ahead. And
Yeah, it almost speaks to maturity, right? So,
yeah,
so from my perspective, yeah, I mean it is. There are tons of people that are flooding the market, that are jumping on right to the security bandwagon. And really one of the biggest things I will say is um, if the if the if the company that is talking to you about security is not talking to you about a program, right? If it is literally um, it's literally just a point product, they're not taking everything in consideration. And I'll give you a couple examples with that is you have cybersecurity insurance providers that are asking you for these specific things, right? And that's great. Yes, these technologies will check the box, but at the end of the day, if you don't, again, going back to if you don't have the program in place, you don't have the governance mechanisms in place there, those tools are not going to necessarily stop any or mitigate all those risks, right? And here's an example is you can have tools in place, but if you don't have policies and procedures in place to from a change management perspective to manage firewall rules and changes, EDR is not going to stop that, right? Necessarily, right? SIM will tell you that something is going on, but again, what is in place to stop somebody from doing a firewall rule and not having it reviewed and opening up your environment to the internet, right? So really, when we start looking at it, if the talk is not about the overall security program and what's trying to be achieved and what you need, and really requirements driven too, to understand, is this for cybersecurity insurance? Is this for compliance or compliance by proxy because you're doing business with entities that have to be regulated? That to me is the differentiator. Matt, I know you have a take on this as well. So
yeah, I do. Similar line of thought here, but the market is so fractured, right? So you have organizations that are great at consulting and advisory services, yet they can't execute on a plan, right? And do the tactical, the technical. You have manufacturers that are developing SIEM and EDR and next gen AV, vulnerability management, right? So you've got those folks that are flooding the market with their marketing messaging and their point solutions. You have SOC as a service providers, you have incident response and forensics firms, you have insurance providers that are really getting heavy-handed, and so the market is super fractured. From my perspective, it would be advantageous to hitch your wagon to an organization that can offer a comprehensive suite of solutions and services, right? Starting with assessments and advisory, steering you in the right direction with security awareness training and social engineering. Certainly the managed security services, so the bundle of tools, instrumentation, the people behind it, the process dictating workflow, and then incident response as well.
Yeah.
So the more you can streamline that versus trying to deal with 4 or 5 different providers or vendors or partners, I think you're set up for success. So my 2 cents.
Yeah. One last thing. The other thing is if we're not talking about what framework to align your business to in that initial conversation around security, to me, I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a red flag, right? Because they're not taking the time to understand what your business is, what you do, what type of data do you have, and then what frameworks would best apply, to what would apply to your business for what you're trying to achieve. If it's just a tools play, I think that leaves a lot of area for concern. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's, thanks, Jordan. Great questions. Keep them coming. We love questions. So, what trends, James, in the cybersecurity space are interesting to you at the moment?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach on this one. So some of the things, and I'm not going to go from a tech again. It's more so the things that I am seeing that are quite interesting are really the trend around compliance by proxy is really one of the biggest things that I am seeing, that is in my eyes trending. And what I mean by that is, people are now being pushed, organizations are really now being pushed to be compliant because of a company that they're doing business with. And the trend is, now they're starting to ask, oh, I have to comply with this, I have to do this. So I am seeing that more and more and more and more. The other trend is kind of from the other side, is the cybersecurity insurance piece of it. It is where the demand that is being put upon the clients, our clients, from a cybersecurity perspective. So when I take, cybersecurity insurance, and I take compliance by proxy, and I'm looking at why companies are asking for things, I mean, they're really being pushed from both sides, and I won't say pressured, but they're being pushed for both sides, and that is a growing trend that we're seeing. And some of the concern with that goes back to the overall program approach, right? They're being pushed for, on the cybersecurity insurance side, of you have to have these things in place and these policies, or these tooling, right? These tools. And then on the other side, it's you have to have something similar from a program perspective, right? Um, so I'm going to just say those are the two biggest trends when I'm talking about, what I'm seeing and how it's impacting our clients. I could talk about the tech and the cool AI security stuff that's going on there, the increase of ransomware and all that type of stuff, and what they're doing differently. The other, I guess, trend, cyber resiliency, is another one that we need to be talking about quite a bit, versus just cybersecurity, right? So just think of the old business continuity play there, right? What can you do in the event of a cyber attack, and how resilient you can be? So I would say those are probably the three that are the most pressing recently. And then Matt, I know you hear a lot too from clients in the industry as well. So.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting, we have a focus group of sorts with CIOs that are primarily in the mid-market. We've done 3 sessions, and I know for those of you that have joined webinars and have been in contact with us in the past, outside of cybersecurity insurance, security awareness training comes up over and over again, right? How to elevate the security consciousness of the end user base, because that's the weakest link. And so what I found interesting in our discussions with CIOs is, for employees in the end user base that are non-compliant on security awareness training, what happens, right, in those scenarios where folks don't go through the training. And so we've heard everything from, we don't really do anything, to, we're going to use public shaming, and, we're going to turn off network access. And I just, I find it interesting to hear of, the different responses for non-compliance as it relates to security awareness training. So that's one that was interesting. And the other one that maybe we can talk about briefly is software defined, security defined perimeter, or secure access service edge, SASE. It kind of came out of nowhere, and obviously distributed workforce that occurred, as a result of the pandemic. And now you've got all these organizations like Google and Amazon and Facebook saying, you know what, we don't need to have folks in the office anymore. So the perimeter, the boundaries of the network have expanded. So James, that one is also interesting. Like, how do you secure folks that are going to be working from anywhere. And I think security defined perimeters is a really interesting concept that we're hearing a lot about, right?
Yeah, we are, and it was kind of interesting going into, kind of COVID and those type of COVID. One of the things that we talked about prior to that was business impacts from a cybersecurity perspective, and that was one of them. Is we call it protect your boundaries, right? So because of the remote workforce, traditionally you could put your protection boundaries around your brick and mortar building or your data center, right? But now with everybody being working from home, basically every endpoint device that travels outside your network has to have that protection boundary around it in some form or fashion, right? So as as you have the mobile workforce, or you have M&A activity, or you name it, that protection boundary is being pushed and pushed and pushed constantly. And to your point with the remote workforce, definitely it is. And that I think that's why you saw those type of things emerging pretty quick. So
Yeah, and sorry, it's a software defined perimeter. I think
yeah.
I said security defined perimeter a few times. So, and for those of you that aren't aware of what that is, think of leveraging a service provider and their network for better performance on applications, because they're tied in with let's say the Azures, the AWSs of the world, where the workloads are moving to. But in addition, creating this on-ramp from somebody's workstation, laptop, onto a secure network, and that's the only way in and out. That's conceptually how it works, right? And it could be folks working, in the office. It could be folks working from, coffee shop, from home, and so I think you're going to hear more and more about that. So if you're not aware of it, SDP, software defined perimeter, or SASE, SASE, security access service edge.
Sorry, Matt, to interrupt. We got two more questions. So the first one is, what do you think is the best way to determine if your cybersecurity is overkill for your company or maybe severely lacking? And then let me know whenever you guys are ready for the second one.
Yeah,
Matt, I'll let you answer that one first, because that you get hit with that quite a bit, I think. So
yeah, so lacking or overkill. So in my opinion, the first step is doing an advisory engagement with us or with another third party. If you don't have a chief information security officer resource available internally, which a lot of organizations don't. And so it's really taking this top-down approach, right? So talking with the executive leadership team about vision and aligning vision to risk management strategies and the security practice overall, I think is critical, because then we can understand, right, where the organization is going. And I'll just give you an example, right? So we work with a lot of organizations that are in the defense industry base. So they're Department of Defense supply chain, regulated, right, because of the data that they create and store. And so if, in talking to executive leadership, they need to make investments in their program, so tools, people, and process, to continue to bid on projects and be awarded contracts, then I think taking that type of approach, then an organization like that is probably going to invest more money in a security program, right? So it would be hard to sort of overdo it, if that makes sense. And then in other cases, we might talk to an executive leadership team that's saying, hey, we need to renew our cybersecurity insurance coverage, and we want to contain costs. So ultimately, it depends on the drivers and the outcomes, and that's going to dictate overall spend. And so starting at the advisory level, and then I would say also just assessments, whether it's ongoing assessments, or something that you're doing every 12 months, just to figure out where the current posture is. So what investments have already been made in, let's say, the security stack, where the weaknesses are so that a game plan can be created moving forward for, I'd say, future investments.
Yeah.
James, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything Matt said. One of the things I will add to that is, I think you really have to be honest with yourself and say, where do we fall within a maturity model? And that where Matt's talking about the assessment piece is you have to be able to assess and find out where you're at on that model. And really, are you being proactive? Are you being reactive? Are you, what are you, kind of where are you falling within there? That's going to help you define.
James, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to show something real quick. Normally we don't in roundtable, but I think this will
Okay.
help. So this is our maturity model. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this was really put together because clients really struggle to understand what they need to do, where they need to go, and how they really align to a maturity model. So when you start looking at things from, here's a chaotic state, reactive, proactive, service, and value. At a chaotic state, you have to understand what you are doing from an overall IT perspective, what you're doing from a security perspective. And that helps you determine, what do I need to do to fix my environment and move more towards a higher level of maturity. So you have professional services, that could help, provide reactive support or even project support to move you more to that proactive level. And then from there, that proactive level is monitoring and management. So you have, we've created multiple kind of levels below proactive management. So you have a maturity level 3, which, okay, do we have service desk in place? So now we have a face for the company to input tickets and incident management and those type of things. You have MFA for multi-factor authentication. You have, base security components. So that is moving you to that proactive level, or up in that proactive level. And then for level 4 is really, okay, now let's take the next step. And that is, how are we managing our cloud environment, SaaS? Do we have MFA enabled for those systems? Do we have true email security? What level of email security do we have? Let's add EDR and replace, traditional AV, right, to get more visibility. And then as you're moving into level 5, you really start pushing that out to say, okay, I need more automation and management capabilities in this environment, especially if a mobile workforce is in place. So you have the MDM management, you have disk encryption, you have SIEM, you have vulnerability management. So by the time you're at, maturity level 5, you are really more proactive of an organization, right? And then also by enabling these type of services, you're also having, the correct model, governance, or sorry, management and operational efficiencies being put in place with these. As you start really, enabling those things, the service level is where we're starting to look at some more advanced items, and what those are really around advisory services like VCIO, VCSO, to understand where the business is going, to really help drive the requirements for those services, right? And then the ultimate value is the governance. So governance from an operational and security perspective, which we talked about a little while ago. And then the regulatory compliance demands that might be out there for the organization. So.
Yeah. Thanks, James. So Jordan, I know we're at time, but I don't know if we can maybe extend 5 minutes if there's one last question, for those folks that can stay, rather than abruptly ending this. Jordan, your call.
Yeah, well, I think this question is really good. It could be beneficial for everybody. So the question is, when working with the government sector, do companies like Diopath have to push away the standards they have set in place in order to be compliant with the government? If so, how do you balance the two?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. When working with the government, do companies like Diopath have to push away the standards they have set in place in order to be compliant with the government? If so, how do you balance it?
Yeah. So I think I'll try to interpret. So if we're working with, a federal agency, for example, they might have specific requirements of us as a service provider, and others. And so I think, the good news is, we've got a lot of experience operating in the federal space, and we've gone through audits, assessments. We've had to employ processes, policies, methodology to placate government contracts. And candidly, commercial sector clients are able to leverage off of all that we've done. But in a lot of cases, obviously those agencies are dictating what they require and expect out of a service provider. So we've gone through that process, and we're able to meet those requirements in a lot of cases in some form or fashion, even if we're aligned to something that may not be applicable, like ITIL or SOC 2 Type 2, or what have you. So James, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I'll try to answer this kind of add on really quick. So just so most people know that NIST standard is really the basis for a lot of security standards out there, ISO and others, and they all pull from each other, even from a SOC 2 Type 2 perspective, right? So I won't say we had to push away from our standards. I would say we customize certain things, really customize certain things, because a lot of those standards from a security perspective are based on NIST and NIST controls. It's just how they're applied, should they be applied, is really the way I would look at that. I don't think it would hinder us, or does not hinder us.
Well, and James, you talk a lot about like the authority to operate, right? I mean, we've
Mhm.
gone through that process with certain agencies, and where the boundaries are drawn as far as services and support are concerned. And so maybe just hit close on that. Oh, we lose you? Okay, well, Jordan, we might have lost James.
Yeah, that's okay. I think this is a good stopping point. We can answer or reiterate these questions in a follow-up email to everybody who's on the call today. And we will get them answered, and the recording sent out to you guys. So great job today, Matt and James. Thank you guys for presenting, and we'll talk to everybody later.
It was awesome. Thank you, everyone.